And what we were interested in basically is how we could build on or maybe add to these types of historiographies or possible ways of doing history with the Internet Archive, and do that with the early blogosphere. So this is basically what we did. We wanted to locate an historical source set. We looked at the Eaton Web portal, and using that, we wanted to create a snapshot of the early blogosphere, and then trying to find a certain number of blogs within a given date range. This is where you kind of do a give and take. It's not completely foolproof way of doing it, but it's definitely works, I think, in giving, as I say, a snapshot. And then what we did is similar to the blogosphere diagram from earlier, is we performed outlink analysis, opening a network, which is not very legible here, but I can zoom in. What you see here, some of the findings were related to how we could profile the early blogosphere. And so here I've just kind of highlighted a cluster of some of the more tech-centered blogs from early on. So you see some familiar names like Slashdot, but you also see some unfamiliar names. Somewhere on this diagram there's Pathfinder.com. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Things like that. The other thing, what I thought was kind of the major finding was a little bit different. What you see here are two blogs that are highlighted, Bradlands and Camworld.com. These are two blogs that you won't find in the Internet Archive. They were like a webmaster can choose to opt out of the Internet Archive, can choose to not have their pages indexed. But of course that doesn't stop anybody, that doesn't remove all the links from these that went to these blogs. So what we have here are two blogs, two quite significant early blogs, if you're like interested in the early blogosphere, as I am, that are not in the Internet Archive, but that we can kind of make a few claims about in terms of where they were situated within this larger network. And yeah, so that was kind of one of the main findings from this work. So I'm going to kind of stop there, and I'll leave the summary up, I guess, just for as an aid in doing the questions. But I will say, I do want to say one more thing. I'll go back to that in a second. Please, my story of digital methods is a very partial one. My focus on web culture is my own. The program is a little bit broader, and I'm sure that if you read the site or if you listen to Richard Rogers' talk or one of the others talk at some point, then you'll hear not entirely different stuff, I hope, but like some other emphases. So I would encourage you definitely to go take a look and definitely think about maybe joining us next year for the summer school. So then what I do now is just put this up and maybe turn it over to questions. Yes.
Thank you. Let's start by Rita.
Thanks. I want to ask about historical method a little bit. And I'm wondering if your group is at all attentive to medium and access, browsers, and speed, essentially. So I'm thinking that a graphics-intensive page designed and accessed in 1996 is going to be very different from that same page accessed in 2010. So I'd be interested to know whether you're going beyond the snapshot approach and thinking not just in terms of interface design, but also in terms of the way that interface, the speed, and in fact, way in the sense of interlaced graphics are going to be very different, et cetera. The way that interface will manifest.
Yeah, I can't say that we're very involved with that, but I can say that in thinking about the way the archive works, you'll notice that the sites that are archived best were the ones that used kind of the least complicated web software, right? So anything with kind of like complicated JavaScript, just gets muddled and messy in the Internet Archive. Flash doesn't. So you try and go deep into a page or something, it just gets muddled up. So Brewster Kahle is actually in interviews kind of called for kind of return to simple design. But I think the question that you're asking, I'm not exactly sure, but I would say that that's more in line with some of the work that it's really good work that Niels Brucker is doing. He's a Danish researcher and kind of a web archiving specialist, and he goes into he's interested in I think these types of questions and kind of like looking at how maybe web interface or web design conventions are implicated, or how they affect web archiving, how they affect maybe historical research, and so on. So
it would be archiving in a sense the experiential aspect, right? Because we'll never again have that period of waiting while we're waiting for the images to
right. Although I would go so far as to argue that the Internet Archive, in being as slow as it is, does its best to kind of no, seriously, in terms of I think at one point I was calling it like a legacy system, but not so much in the sense that it's been surpassed, but in that it kind of keeps cyberspace alive in that sense. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that's again Niels Brucker, but also the two researchers who do a lot of, I forget their names, at the University of Washington, Steve and Kirsten. I can look it up, but they're also very much into thinking about the nature of the medium and how that gets exposed through kind of incomplete archives like that. It's very, very interesting work. Look them up.
I'm curious, you said that webmasters can opt out of the archive? Well, webmaster, like, in terms of, like, the entire domain, or, because I know, you have, like, the live journals and that sort of thing. Can individual bloggers opt their blogs out of the archive, and how do you do that?
That's actually something we should, just check out. Like, because you can do that simply. I can't go online here, but like you can do that simply by looking at the source code of a page and looking at the robots.txt. So you just kind of do Control F on that, and then you look at, and if it says no archive, that's the text that webmasters use to signal to the Internet Archive, don't include my pages in the archive. What's a fascinating kind of another footnote, like for the people that really like this stuff, is that the Internet Archive, if it archived those pages in the past, right, when the site was live, but then the domain gets sold to, like, say, GoDaddy.com or whatever, or it doesn't get renewed. A lot of these domain placeholders, these GoDaddy type companies, they'll put the robots.txt on, right? And then suddenly the archives of this old site are gone, but they can return when somebody buys that domain again and then removes it. So there's a website that I'm particularly into. I wanted to start like an undead blogs sort of foundation, but the one website is a website called placing.com that I'm really interested in work I'm currently doing, and it's one of these situations, but it's also one of these domains that's ridiculously expensive. So placing.com, it's $68,000. So I've got an open request for anyone who's got the funds to kind of help me out here in the spirit of sort of web historical research.